strategic moments, which is on page 6 in section 3. Strategic moments are those moments or points in a discussion or in a meeting when a group is faced with a decision about what to do next and how to do it. And some examples of strategic moments are a group is stuck and can't figure out how to move forward. Or a group is talking about more than one topic or using more than one process at the same time. We're up in present levels of performance, and we have a school psychologist that wants to give us her recommendations for placement when she goes through her report. Or the group has reached a decision in one section, and now we need to move into the next section. Or perhaps the principal and the father are on the floor wrestling. So we want them back in their chairs and paying attention. There are 3 questions that guide a strategic moment. The first is, where are we? The principal and the parent are on the floor wrestling. Where do we want them to be? I want them back in their chairs discussing present levels of performance. And how do we get there? That question is answered through the use of interventions. And I want to call your attention to the statement at the bottom. It's not knowing what to do that counts. It's knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. Those are words to live by. So let's look at interventions. The first one is a boomerang. And we saw a facilitator in our group, Doug, use a boomerang beautifully. When questions came up, she boomeranged them back to the group. So, Sharon asks a question. We say, great question, Sharon. Let's open it up to the group. Or perhaps, Sharon has had an opinion and asks a question related to communication. We say, great question. Before we open it up to the group, let's see what our speech pathologist thinks. So we're going to target it to a specific person. The third way you can do it is that someone asks a question, and I know they're just dying to give me the answer. So I'm going to say, great question, Marshall. Before we go on, do you have any words that you want to share with us on that? Now, I have to make sure that I read Marshall very carefully, because if it's a legitimate question, he's going to look at me and say, I don't know, Joyce, that's why I asked you. So boomerangs are a very, very powerful way of getting the whole group engaged in the discussion. Regain focus. Now, most of you come from an education background. You've been doing this in classrooms and in teaching situations all the time. Okay, guys, let's focus back on present levels of performance. Come on, let's get back on target. We're bird walking, we're off task. Ask or say what's going on. This is one of my favorites. This is where you get that elephant that Doug keeps talking about out in the middle of the room and you talk about it. Wow, I noticed it got awfully quiet in here when we started talking about swimming with dolphins. What's going on? Or I might say, wow, I noticed when we brought up the topic of extra speech therapy services and additional services that our speech pathologist got into a sidebar conversation over here with the classroom teacher. What's going on? Can you share? You want to get those difficult conversations out here. You know how at the end of the meeting, everybody goes out and has the real meeting out in the parking lot? They all stand out by their cars and they're all having the discussions. You want to get those discussions that are out there in here and have them now. And that's what Ask or Say What's Going On is about. Now, it's hard. Ask or Say What's Going On is tough to do, but it's also extremely powerful. And you can really, really get those difficult conversations surfaced and have them here. And that's what this is about. Enforce process agreements. Doug talked to you about the importance of making process agreements. Once you've made that agreement and you've agreed to the ground rules, I can now go back and enforce the ground rules. Guys, remember we all said we communicate clearly and listen carefully. So let's make sure that we really ask questions and we get that done. Everybody's okay with that. Is that still an okay rule with everybody? Great. I'm going to come back to accept and legitimize, deal with, or defer, and we're going to spend some time on it because it's a very, very powerful tool. Using body language. You know, I think the body language, you can interject yourself into a situation, you can move things along. Come on guys, let's talk about it. I need some input here. Or, whoa, time, let's stop here and talk about this. Wait a minute guys, we're off target. So you can use yourself, or you can interject yourself. You know, maybe Mike and Mary Jean over here are getting ready to get in an argument. I'm going to stand between them and break up their eye contact so they can't do that. So that's where body language comes in and is very, very important. Using humor. I don't think there's anything more powerful to decrease the tension in a meeting or in a group than the use of appropriate humor. It can also be caustic and deadly if you're not careful in the type of humor that you pick. An IEP meeting is not the place to have humor at someone else's expense. You can certainly have it at your own expense. This is one of those things where you laugh at yourself and the world will laugh with you. And also silly puns or silly jokes, some silly comment. We were doing the workshop up in, I think it was in Maryland, and we had a young woman. We were in it was over summer, and we were in a closed school, and there were several boxes in the room, and she was up facilitating. She was taking her prior swing at the practice facilitation, and across the floor comes La Cucaracha. And everybody is mesmerized by this cockroach moving across the room rather than our poor friend who was facilitating. And she knew that, so without missing a beat, she goes over and she says, "And you didn't get an invitation to this meeting." And everybody in the room just busted up. And it was very, very appropriate, and it was a good way to decrease the tension that had been created in this difficult practice IEP that we have been doing. I suppose you could say that she broke my rule about not having humor at someone else's expense, because it was certainly at the cockroach's expense. Accept and legitimize, deal with, or defer. If you don't learn anything else in these 2 days, learn this one. This is really important. When this is how you handle someone who is being difficult or who has introduced a difficult moment into the meeting and it threatens to derail your meeting. The first thing I'm going to do is accept what they've said and legitimize it. Perhaps I will do that by asking my recorder to write it on our group memory, and I will deal with it at the meeting. Or I will defer, in which case I would write it on the parking lot. We all need to have phrases or things that we can say to someone that are authentic, that will accept and legitimize where they're coming from. If someone is upset, if there is high emotion there, we need a way to deflect that. We need to get that individual to a place where their emotion has decreased enough that they can participate and really actively participate in our meeting.